This is Eskdale in the English Lake District. A few years ago, the River Esk was designated one of the cleanest rivers in Europe, and it was one of the most prolific for salmon and sea trout. But over the last 5 years, catches have mysteriously declined. Hugh Falkus, naturalist and author, has lived here for 37 years, making a detailed study of its fish species. In June 1980, there was a sudden rainstorm following a long dry period. That fish decline culminated in a dramatic incident.
I came down to the river where I'm standing here one day and saw dead fish being swept downstream. And where we are here, where it gets shallow by the weir, I was picking out salmon up to 20 pounds and sea trout up to 12 pounds in weight, and that's a very big sea trout. Very beautiful fish covered with sea lice. They had just come up from the sea, which is only a mile or so away, and something had killed them.
Waterboard scientists, of course, suspected a massive pollutant was at work. But chemical tests revealed no detergents, no pesticides, no chemical or radioactive waste of any kind. The water was crystal clear. Are we facing a pollution new to Britain?
After the Industrial Revolution, as you know, so many of our rivers became terribly polluted and the runs of migratory fish became extinct in those rivers. And now, after this fantastic effort during the last 15 years or so, a lot of our rivers have become clean enough to look after and to breed runs of migratory fish. And they're coming back to those rivers. And now, just as we're getting the water clean from the pollution we pour into it, we have to look straight over our head. That's where the threat is coming from. Like the sword of Damocles, this pollution is literally hanging straight overhead.
Life in industrial Britain used to be dominated by the chimney. Factories, power stations and houses belched out sulphurous smoke which rained back down on the inhabitants. As long ago as 1868, an Englishman, Robert Angus Smith, noted that rain in cities like Manchester and Leeds was falling as strong acid, rotting masonry and stunting the growth of plants. His observations went largely unnoticed. The pollution continued unabated. The appalling London pea soup smogs was simply tolerated until the notorious smog of 1952 carried off 4,000 people with chest disease. The government was forced into the Clean Air Act. As the skies of our towns and cities have cleared, we've assumed the problem of air pollution has simply gone away. This beautiful house stands on the bank of the River Tovdal, just north of Kristiansand in southern Norway. It was especially built in the 1920s to accommodate the British angling aristocrats. In those days, the Tovdal was the El Dorado of salmon rivers. To catch 1,000 fish on one holiday was commonplace. But the house now stands as a relic of a bygone age. On the dining room table, the meticulously kept fishing record tells its own sorry tale. These are the enormous catches of the 30s and 40s, but by 1960 those catches were scarcely worth recording. The fish had gone. All the major rivers flowing from this part of Norway have shared the same fate as the Tovdal. The British have long disappeared, muttering about overfishing, but the Norwegians believe the answer is acid rain.
The people at the time thought that the overfishing was the reason. But we have some pH data from that time, which, with today's knowledge, tells us that the pH must have been, or the acidity must have been the main cause. And besides, we have had the same fishing practicing all along the salmon rivers along the coast, and in areas which is not that sensitive to acidification. The fishing is just as good, in some places even better today.
In solving our local air pollution problem in the 50s, we exchanged it for an international one. Sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides from our power stations, factories and motor vehicles have continued to belch into the atmosphere, where they can travel enormous distances. In the sky, those gases are partially converted into sulfuric and nitric acids. Whenever